everyone. I'm Jennifer Whitaker, trauma specialist, and welcome back. If you're new, welcome for the first time. It's great to have you here. And today I'm recording the second video in a series that I'm doing on Dr. Steve Hassan's byte model of authoritarian control. And the byte model of authoritarian control was developed by Dr. Hassan to describe the specific methods and tactics that authoritarian groups, leaders, and individuals will use to recruit and maintain control over other people. And this is so important because these power over and control dynamics are actually on the rise in the world around us. They tend to get worse whenever we're faced with uncertainty or unpredictability. And man, we've been steeped in that for several years now. So that's why these power over dynamics and kind of culty and controlling dynamics seem to be getting worse out in the world. And just like a puppeteer with a marionette, once the puppeteer has control, it doesn't take a very big move out of the cross brace to create a very specific movement or behavior in the marionette that's being controlled. So what you're seeing in a marionette show is the result of very small, subtle, tiny movements made by the hand of the puppeteer that are really hard to spot with the naked eye. And that's the magic in the marionette show, because you don't quite see how such a little movement can create a big behavior in the marionettes. And it creates this sense of amazement at how this lifelike interaction between marionettes can result from such minute movements of the cross brace and the strings. So please keep that in mind as you watch this series of videos. And more importantly, keep this in mind before you judge or shame someone who's in a controlling or abusive relationship and you're thinking they should just get over it or just get out, because it's not that easy, especially when the person can't see that they're being controlled. And it's more common not to be able to see it and to be blind to what's really happening than it is to see it with eyes wide open, because the denial is a psychological protection. That's a whole different topic I'm not going to get into today. I don't have time. But seriously, if it were just know, and I think you know, I mean, we're all smart people. If it were that easy to spot, no one would ever end up in such situations. So this highlights the importance of noticing the little things, the subtleties, the nuances, and the minutia of the relationships and the situations that we're in. And to use the byte model most effectively, think of one relationship or one situation at a time as you go through this list. And if you do wish to follow along with me as I go through this list, please go to freedomofmind.com, and in the drop-down menu under Education, choose Steve Hassan's byte model of authoritarian control. And I'm Jennifer Whitaker, trauma specialist. If you find value in my videos and the information that I'm sharing, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, and I'm in the middle of a series, so don't forget to hit that bell, because I'd hate for you to miss any other videos, especially in this particular series, because they're really important. So let's jump in and talk about the B in the byte model. And Dr. Hassan's byte model stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And today I'm going to go over the 25 different criteria that Dr. Hassan has outlined under behavior control. And some of them you'll notice that I kind of lump together, especially when we get to the end. And some of them I might abbreviate the words because there are some words in here that YouTube just doesn't like. And it's very possible that if I actually say the words, YouTube will censor my video. So let's jump into behavior control. So number one on the list is regulate an individual's physical reality. And so think about, in a specific relationship or a specific situation, is your physical reality being regulated or controlled by somebody else? Or are you possibly regulating or controlling someone else's physical reality? Number two, dictating where, how, and with whom an individual lives and associates or there might even be isolation of the victim. And this can happen in narcissistically abusive relationships. And we can see it in relationships with certain groups, like groups that are considered cults. This was a big one for NXIVM. NXIVM was based in Albany, New York. And Keith Raniere convinced a lot of people to move to Albany, New York to join his cause. And they left places like Vancouver and Hollywood and beautiful places that it's hard to imagine they would leave them to go to Albany. Number 3, dictating when, how, and with whom an individual has sex. And in power over situations or cultic situations, this can lead, or even human trafficking. This can, like, some people can get sucked into human trafficking, where they're fearing for their life if they don't do what they're told. And this can happen in abusive relationships where one person might be convinced into doing something that they wouldn't normally do or that makes them feel off. And in some really insidious cults where they're sex cults to some degree, there's, just outright assault and the R word, which is one of those words that can get my video flagged. Number 4. Are the types of clothing and hairstyles being controlled or dictated? And that's important too. And if it's a group situation, if you see all the group members dressing alike, like wearing the same garb or wearing the same headgear or, whatever it is, the same hairstyles or having a certain look about them, that's a red flag. Now, if it's the only red flag, it might be okay. But if there are several other ones that stack on top of it, then that's where you really need to start to question, what am I involved with? Is there any regulation of diet, food and drink, or any regulation of hunger and fasting? And this is number 5 on the list. And again, this is something that's happening with more modern day groups that are destructive or kind of culty. And this can happen in family situations where a parent is overly concerned with how one of the children looks, especially if they're not as thin or as beautiful as the parent thinks they should be. So this can be really detrimental and harmful in situations to regulate diet or, exercise, things like that. Number 6 on the list is manipulation and deprivation of sleep. Now, this is a really big one, especially if you find yourself in a controlling situation. What are your sleep habits like? And I'm not saying you never get good sleep, but it's more likely that you're going to be kind of consistently sleep deprived or consistently tired or feeling exhausted, because the busier, especially if it's a controlling group, the busier the group can keep you, the more or the less likely you are to think critically, to connect with yourself, to be introspective, to think about, what happened with my day and how do I feel about that? Some of these normal thought processes that we go through at the end of the day. Sleep deprivation can really interrupt that process and make you easier to control when you're always busy and frantically running around trying to get things done for the group or for whoever's dictating that you do all the busy work. Number 7 on the list is financial exploitation, manipulation, or dependence. And again, this is a big one. Financial control in controlling relationships. It's not uncommon to have a joint account. And so you come home and you deposit your paycheck into the joint account, but then you have to ask permission to the other person, whether it's your spouse or usually it's a spouse or a partner in this type of situation where you're having to ask to access your own money. So be very careful about things like that. And if it's like a group situation, you might be required to keep paying for things and to keep buying things and keep putting money into it. If you want to get to the next level, you have to pay for this expensive class. Or you might be given a small allowance each week that it makes it hard to make ends meet on such a little bit. So it creates this dependence on somebody to access money. Number 8 on the list. Is leisure, entertainment, and vacation time restricted in any way? Are you able to do whatever you want? Or do you have to ask permission? So these are things to think about. How is your leisure and entertainment and vacation time being controlled, or do you have free access to go whenever you choose? 9 on the list, is there major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals? Or there could even be self-indoctrination, through the internet. And so let's say a good example of this would be an MLM. So let's just say that you just signed on to an MLM and you're going to start your own, little business from home. How much time do you have to spend going to classes and trainings, and what times of the day are you expected to be online? And, like, what all is your upline telling you to do? Because there is a process of self-indoctrination here. And if you don't do what they tell you to do, then there's the shaming and, oh, if you just work hard, and if you're not successful, then it's all your fault because you didn't work hard enough. You didn't put the hours in. And there are a lot of people out there running ragged and putting hours and hours and hours in, not spending enough time with their family and not being successful because there's this weird combination that's happening with group and self-indoctrination in certain situations. And keep in mind, this is not just limited to MLMs, but that's just a really good example to highlight it. Number 10 on the list, is permission required to make any major decisions? And it doesn't even have to be major decisions. Like, do you have to get permission to go get your hair cut, or, to go shopping for necessities? Like, do you have to have permission to leave the house? Do you have to have permission before you can plan a vacation? Do you have to have permission to, like, buy a new car, or permission to choose where you're going to live? And if you're a fully functioning adult and you're having to ask permission for these decisions, that could be a red flag where you might want to look deeper into that particular situation. 11 on the list, rewards and punishments are used to modify behaviors, and that could be either positive or negative. And the positive rewards are one way that people stay in these situations, because those positive rewards hit the reward centers in the brain and we get those endorphins. And when we get those little hits of endorphins and, like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, or whenever, those are the feel-good things that can keep us in those situations. So the rewards might be few and far between, but they could be strong enough that it keeps us there looking for more. 12, is there a discouragement of individualism and an encouragement of groupthink? And this is where you get into behaviors where, as soon as you start to express an individual perspective, you're going to be attacked, you're going to be shamed. And so they're going to control your behavior and what you say and what you do by shaming you into conforming to what everybody else is doing. 13 on the list, the imposition of rigid rules and regulations. And again, this is another big one. You can do this, but not this. You can do this, but not that. And having to follow a certain set of rules or standards, to the point where you start to anticipate, oh, if I do this, I know I'm going to get in trouble for it. So there's this subtle whittling away of your free will and what you're able to do and access in your life. 14 on the list is punishing disobedience through things like through physical behaviors like beating, torture, burning, cutting, the R word that I couldn't mention earlier, and even things like tattooing and branding. That's just a horrible crime. And sometimes, now this does get into a little bit more of the extreme destructive types of relationships and situations you might experience in groups, more on the extreme end. And also, it's not unheard of. So how is disobedience punished? That's something that's important to look at. 15 on the list, is there a threat of harm to family or friends if you don't do what you're told and if you don't fall into line? This is a big one that human traffickers use, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking. The threat to harm family and friends is a big one that can keep people trapped, because people love their parents, their siblings, their children so much that they are willing to do anything to keep their family safe. 16, I'm going to kind of gloss over because it talks about the R word. But there are situations where people are forced to, and this happens again in sex trafficking, where a person is forced to either R or be R'd by somebody else. 17 on the list is encouraging and engaging in corporal punishment. And, again, you might think, oh, how silly, like who's going to do that? But it does happen where corporal punishment or some sort of physical punishment will happen if you don't follow the rules. 18 on the list is instilling dependency and obedience. And what's not here is, like the dependency and obedience kind of go hand in hand with loyalty. So sometimes there is this expectation of dependence, obedience, and loyalty. And so if that expectation is coming from the outside, it can be harmful. But if there's something inside of you that wants to be loyal, that's a little bit of a different story. So start to notice that. I'm going to skip over 19, 20, and 21 for right now, and I'm going to skip 22 as well. 23 on the list is separation of families. And this is a big one that we see in some of the big cults, like Scientology is notorious for this one. If your family is in Scientology and you choose to leave, you will be excommunicated and considered a suppressive person, and you'll lose contact with your family. And that is devastating for people. And that's another way that people stay in situations that sometimes they know are harmful because they don't want to lose their loved ones. And the reason I skipped over 19, 20, 21, 22, and then 24 and 25 is because they get into blatant crimes: kidnapping, beating, torture, the R word, imprisonment, or even murder. So these are all things that can result from, kind of in that muddy middle where it's like, and most people are in that muddy middle, like, oh, there are parts of this relationship that's healthy, there are parts that are destructive. And so it's a matter of weighing the options and looking at what is most harmful in my life and what isn't. So please tune into the next video where I talk about information control, which is the I in the byte model. So I'm going to, like I said, notice these videos get kind of long as we go through it and break it down, which is why I'm breaking this down into different videos so I don't have like a 90-minute or 2-hour video talking just about the byte model. So I hope you'll tune in next week when I talk about information control. And I'll see you next time, everyone. I hope you found this helpful, and happy self-discovery.